Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Dimitri. I am a technical director at the Royal Institution of Naval Architects, and I would like to welcome all of you on this session. So we have two speakers, and the first speaker, she'll probably announce the name of the session is Catriona. Catriona. Yeah, the floor is yours. So I will keep an eye on everyone, and if someone joins, I will try to mute them just to avoid any noise. But if you could also mute yourself, well, obviously except Catriona, and just try to note any questions, and you will be able to ask those questions at the end of the session. And just a quick note, so Monica, I also made you a co-host. So I think you also have a presentation, right, at the end. So now being a co-host, you will be able to share your screen when it's needed. All right, thank you very much. And another notice, so we started recording the session just for your information. So this session is being recorded. So Catriona, the floor is yours. The virtual floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dimitri, much appreciated. Thank you all for joining us. It's great to see a number of different people here. And if I look around, I can see people from a variety of different committees, etc. This is really, I suppose, our first opportunity as the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Working Group to tell you a little bit about what we're doing, what's going on, also how we're linking in with the Royal Academy and the incentives and activities that they are doing at ED&I. And hopefully what we want to do is perhaps raise a little bit of awareness. Some of what we say you might already know, and I apologise for that if that's the case. But also, yes, raise that awareness and give you an opportunity to see some things that you could potentially be doing in your committees or in your wider working life to contribute to ED&I across the naval architecture community. As Dimitri said, feel free to ask questions. You can put them in the chat if you want to, or save them for later, and we'll address them when we can. So the first thing I'm going to do before I hand over to Monica is just to give you a little bit of a summary of where we are at the moment. We've been looking at what the statistics are for membership across the institution, and at the moment we only have limited statistics. So the ones that I'm going to be talking about are gender, but of course we all know that equality, diversity and inclusion is much wider than gender. It's also about the variety of occupations that we have. It's about disabilities, it's about ethnicity, it's about all sorts of different things. And the one thing that we do recognise, and I think Monica will touch on a little later, is that it can be quite different as well, depending on the country that you're in and also the type of organisation that you work for. So in looking at what this means for RINA and the RINA membership, broadly speaking, the percentage of engineers in the UK, that are women in the UK, is around 12%. It's much higher in some other countries overseas, and Monica, I know, has some statistics she's going to give you for those. But if we look across our membership, we have about 16% of our student members are women, 11% of our associate members are women, 5% of our members and 1% of our fellows. So we can see that actually those are quite low values, particularly when we think about, I mean, a little bit consistent with the UK, but not at the higher membership levels. And certainly where we have a higher proportion in some of our overseas countries, not representative of that at all. Interestingly, although it's very close call, and of course the numbers we're talking about are not huge, so perhaps we could question them as being how statistically significant they are. But our highest percentage of female members per number of members is in the Americas, and then that's followed by Asia. In the list in the Pacific region. So again, if we highlight Europe, where we have our largest number of members, in totality, actually we come much lower down the list. However, if we look at our RINA committees and our council and board, and I sit both on the board and the council, and I'm also the chair of the membership committee, we see that we've got about 12% female representation across those committees and the council and the board, if we average it over those. So on the plus side, although perhaps our female membership across the institution is not as good as we would like, it is broadly represented in those committees and in the council and board. So that is at least something. So we've got those sorts of observations. We'd obviously like to be able to make those observations over a wider variety of equality, diversity and inclusion aspects, but that's where we are at the moment. And so what are we doing? What have we done? In the last couple of years, we created a working group, and that working group is chaired by Emma McPavich, who works at University College London, and there's a few others who are on it, including myself, plus some industry representatives. And in that working group, we have started by writing a policy, and also creating a strategy and looking at what we want to do in the short and long term with regards to improving how we work with ED&I in RINA. As part of that, we've actually taken on board a number of the actions that the board created in their strategic review. So it incorporates those. And also the other thing that's been probably most significant, I'd say, in the last year was that we had our first award provided for to an individual, an organisation or a group for improvements in ED&I across the maritime sector. And I don't know whether you saw that or not, but that was awarded to Natalie Desti of STEM Returners, who's done some excellent work in getting people who've taken career breaks, not just women but men also, back into STEM organisations, and has been very successful in doing that. So we're sort of on our way, I would say, to improving where we are. And the most important bit about our strategy, I think, is the fact that Emma has been working incredibly closely with the Royal Academy of Engineering, and the approach that they've been taking in progressing improvements in ED&I. And Monica's going to talk you through the progression process that they use in the Academy of Engineering. And Emma McPavich has also been sat on the committee that they use to look at that process and also adapt and continuously improve that process going forward. And at this time, it's still doing that. So hopefully that gives you a flavour for the fact that you know something's being done at RINA, and we want to be continually improving and filtering out into more of the committees, and this is why we want to make you aware of what we're doing. And I'm now going to hand over to Monica to tell us a little bit about the work that she's been doing with Emma and what they're doing at the Royal Academy.
Hi everyone, very nice to meet you. Thank you for having me. So I would like to share my screen if it's possible. Just to introduce myself, I'm a diversity and inclusion manager at the Academy. I look after our work with the diversity and inclusion progression framework. And I also lead our internal work, which is all about making sure that we reflect diversity and inclusion best practices within the Academy, that we lead with integrity in this space. So today, I'm going to talk to you about why diversity and inclusion is important. What can you do to drive diversity and inclusion within your organization? And then for those of you who don't know what the progression framework is, I thought it would be useful to sort of give you a bit of background, tell you what we've been up to, what are we going to do in the next few months. I'll also mention a few things about our progression framework steering group, and Catriona already said that Emma is on the group as well. And I'll signpost to some of the workshops and webinars that we have already organized as part of the steering group to help other professional engineering institutions on their D&I journey. So before we get started, I have a little quiz for you around diversity and inclusion. I know I'm talking to very smart people, and smart people love a good quiz. So I just have a few questions for you. Don't worry if you don't know the answer. The answers to the questions change all the time as well. So I had to check if this is still relevant. So if you want to give an answer, just unmute yourself and just have a guess. So the first question: what percentage of CEOs in FTSE 100 companies were from a minority background in 2020? Anyone know the answer?
3%?
How much?
3?
3? Okay, it's a bit too pessimistic, but not far away. Close. You're very close. Anyone else?
Monica, just wondering how do you define minority background?
So Black, Asian, ethnic minorities. So basically everybody that is not white.
In the UK FTSE, let's try 5%.
Okay, closer, warmer. Okay, so the answer is 7%. So to put things in context, around 13-14% of the UK population identifies as being Black, Asian, or ethnic minority. So the statistics don't match the talent that is out there, right? Okay, next. You were close. All of you were close. So good. Next question. As of June 2020, how many CEOs in FTSE 100 firms are women? Again, half of the UK population is made out of women, right? 50%. What do you think is the number of women that are CEOs?
7%?
A bit worse. It's 5 women. Last year, 2 years ago, there were 6 women, but one of them resigned. So now we just have 5. And none of them are Black, so all of them are white. Okay, next question. What percentage of workers in UK engineering occupations were female?
I'm going to guess this
20%?
one. Oh,
Yeah.
Maybe 20%?
In some countries, yes, but in the UK,
15?
12%. So close, 12%. Okay, so the last question is around mental health. So according to the World Health Organization, how many people will be affected by a mental or neurological disorder at some point in their lives? 1 in, what do you think?
15%?
It's about 1 in 4 people. So the thing, so that could be anxiety, depression, all sorts of challenges like that.
25%?
Okay, we are in EG. We are in EG.
The interesting part about it is that actually with children, it's 1 in 8 children that have a mental health disorder. So clearly, as we grow older, something happens with us, and we develop other conditions as well around mental health, and a lot of them are related to the workplace as well. So the workplace, whatever your environment looks like, it can either exacerbate whatever challenges you already have, or even if you have no issue, if you are in a working environment where there is bullying, where there's harassment, then you will develop these challenges. Okay, so next slide is, we're not going to go through with this too much, but I thought it's interesting to actually look at the ethnicity statistics in the UK versus London. So these numbers are taken from the ONS, from the 2011 census. That's the latest one that's available. So if you look at London versus England and Wales, the ethnicity stats are completely different. Let's say if you look at the white population in the UK, in London, it's only actually like around 60%, right? And that includes white other, which includes European immigrants, for instance. So that would explain the difference there. And then if you actually look at the entire England and Wales, actually 86% of the entire population is white. So the reason why I wanted to show you the stats is just to keep things in perspective. So if your offices are London-based, your employees should reflect the London population, because that's the talent from which you're drawing, right? Okay, next slide. Again, why diversity and inclusion is important. We saw that the UK is not really doing that well when it comes to women in engineering, but actually, if you look around the world, there are other countries, other regions that are doing much, much better, and there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from them. So in Romania, for instance, 40% of the researchers in engineering are women. It's much lower in the UK. And in Algeria, women represent around 40% of those studying STEM. So clearly, there's hope. And there's a lot of things that we can learn from other countries, and those things can be related to maybe the messages that children get when they're young about the sort of professions that they could go into. It can be related to policies at state level, messages that they get from there, messages from popular culture, but also things that organizations like whatever the equivalent is in their countries for the Royal Academy of Engineering, or for your organization, is in what they do to promote the message that anybody can be an engineer, and that engineering is really an exciting, creative, very fulfilling profession. So we look at the fact that actually there are very few women and people from minority backgrounds in engineering. But the other issue is in the UK, at least, where we've done this research, is that when they do come in, there is an inclusion gap. So not everyone experiences the workplace in the same way. So a few years ago, the Academy did a survey of looking at the culture of engineering. And we found some big differences, actually. So, for instance, white engineers are more included in the workplace than engineers that identify as BME engineers, that's Black, Asian, minority, ethnics. Women feel less included than men. And the biggest difference actually is around disabilities. So people with disabilities feel much less included than people who don't have a disability. And that's actually, that really made me stop and think, because disability is just one of those things that can affect anybody, right? Most people are not born with a disability. We acquire them throughout our life, whether we have an accident or just a normal process of getting older. We have more issues with mobility. Maybe our hearing is not that great. So if you want to keep those engineers with a lot of experience, if you want to keep them in engineering as they grow older, as they get more disabilities, we really need to think about inclusion and how we can make sure that our workplace works for them as well. Okay, so there's some really new interesting research around diversity and inclusion and the impact of discrimination on your physical and mental health. So we know that when we come to work, especially in engineering, there is this culture of safety, right? Physical safety. And I think the same principles should be applied when it comes to mental health, right? We don't expect to come to work and be in danger and have an accident, right? We are thinking about making sure that our workplace is safe. The same thing should be applied to mental health. And actually, if you have a workplace where there is discrimination, where there is bullying, harassment, where people don't feel like they belong, they can develop all sorts of physical, mental issues. So one of the things, for instance, you'll see here that if you feel discriminated, you're going to have more headaches. You're going to have problems with your stomach, with your heart. From a mental health perspective, you're going to have more anxiety, you're going to suffer from the imposter syndrome, as we call it. You're going to have nightmares, you're going to be always suspicious about the people around you, you're going to have flashbacks, so all sorts of things like that that are actually not very productive, they're not very positive, right? And then that can also affect your behavior, so you're less likely to eat well, less likely to have a good night's sleep, you're less able to concentrate, less motivated, less productive. And in the workplace, obviously everybody wants their workforce to be as productive and as motivated as possible. So there is a clear connection there between diversity and inclusion and good positive outcomes from a business perspective. And then the next one, so we talked about the fact that there are very few, there's very few diversity in engineering, and for the people that are in engineering, if they are not part of the majority, they feel less included, right? But what does that mean? Well, the products and the services that engineers put out there. So here is a slide with a few examples of products that went terribly wrong because they didn't think about how various people would use their product. So the first example there is taken from a scandal that took place a few years ago in the US. So they had this automatic bathroom soap dispensers that you would wave in front of them and soap would come up. Well, they didn't recognize anything other than white hands. So obviously that's a problem. Everybody else needs to wash their hands as well. So they should have really thought about testing those products on a diversity of people. Then you have in technology all this really cool, really exciting world-changing softwares like facial recognition programs that are used a lot in security and I think in terrorism activities as well to recognize maybe people who put up a bomb or something like that. And the issue is that they are not created in a way that are able to accurately recognize people that are Black. So they would identify the wrong person, right? Then there are all these platforms, voice platforms like Alexa, that are really great unless you're a woman or unless you have an accent. So again, with this voice softwares, there were some studies done in the US, and they've noticed that these programs have a hard time recognizing Southern accents. So they would be more likely to recognize West Coast accents, the San Francisco accent, LA accent, New York accent, but not so much anything else in between. And it's not really surprising, right? Because the people in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco that are creating this product are not very diverse, right? They probably don't have a lot of people from the South in their workplace, from Alabama or other places like that. So those products are a reflection or mirror of the people that created those products. And then you might have seen in the news all sorts of discussions around how smartphones are too big for women's hands. So again, that can create some problems for women, as we tend to use them quite a lot. And diversity and inclusion is also a safety. It's not just a business issue, but it's very much connected to safety. So all that we have here, a list of products that were created to protect us, but they're not actually fit for purpose. So seatbelts, for instance, do not work very well for pregnant women. And then police officers usually get these body armors, but they have not really been designed for women's bodies. Since men and women have different body types, the armors is not actually doing much to protect women. They're too big, they're placed awkwardly, they're too heavy for women, so it's not ideal. They're just not working right. And it's not that they're not working right. It also they also create all sorts of physical issues for women. And then when we think about cities and how they're being built, they're not built with people with disabilities in mind. So we don't really think about how they're being, how our mass public transportation, for instance, is being used by people with various mobility issues. So if you are in a wheelchair, for instance, it is very hard to get to work. It is very hard to get to a job interview. You have to think and prepare very well about how you're going to get to your destination, right? And you're also more likely to have to use maybe taxis, because maybe the area that you live in is not that well connected, and it's not that well designed for people with disabilities. Okay, so next slide is around what can you do, simple things that you can do to make sure that you have a more diverse and more inclusive membership and workforce. So one of the things that you can do is, first of all, figure out where you are, so you can then make a plan on how to improve. And diversity data can help you with that. Collecting and monitoring your diversity data can help you with that. I'm now speaking to engineers here, and engineers use data quite a lot, and you know how important that is. So here are just a few tips on how to make sure that, okay, you have a fantastic diversity form. How can you make sure that you use it properly, and how do you make sure that people actually give you that diversity data that you can then use to inform your activities and processes? So first of all, make sure that you build trust. Like I said, giving out your information around sexual orientation, your religion, your disability, not a lot of people feel comfortable sharing that information. So make sure that it's very clear that this information is confidential, and show people how you're actually going to use that data for good. Then once you have that data, make sure that whatever you collect actually matches your business goal. So don't collect data just for the sake of collecting data. It has to match, and it has to fit your business goal. Then look at your applicant's life cycle. So for instance, if you're a business employing people, or you're just you have some prizes and awards and you have applicants, look at what happened. Look at the journey of people throughout your selection cycle. So for instance, it can be that you have a lot of women applying for a prize or for an award, but then your data tells you that nobody gets at the interview stage. No women gets to the interview stage, right? Or it can be that no women are applying to your prize and award. So then you have to think, actually, you need to focus your energy on attracting more women or people from various backgrounds to apply for that prize and award. And you can do that in a lot of ways. You can make sure that your website is accessible, that you show all sorts of images of diverse people. You focus on flexibility and how you're embracing that. So that data can tell you where the problems are, right? Then the other thing that I would suggest is measure both diversity and inclusion. And you can measure the inclusion through all sorts of engagement surveys. You can have focus groups where you can bring in a few individuals to ask them about their experience. And then connected to that, capture both qualitative and quantitative data. Your statistics are extremely important, but sometimes stories can be very powerful as well, and they can tell you things that you can't neatly capture through a survey. And then once you've gathered that data, you looked at it, you analyze it, make sure to update your relevant stakeholders. Who needs to who needs to have access to the statistics, who needs to be kept informed about any changes that are happening. A few more tips here around inclusive selection. So one of the things that I always advocate for is start with making sure that your ads for whatever prize or award you have or job you may have is as inclusive as possible. So be mindful of the language that you use. So for instance, there's a lot of research that says that there are some words that we associate with masculinity and some words that we associate with femininity. So for instance, words like competitive or words like collaborative are very gender. So a word like competitive can be seen as male, and a word like collaborative can be seen as female. So make sure that you have a balance there of words, so you can attract both sides. And there is actually a free website that you can use. It's called the Gender Decoder. You only have to copy paste your text, and then it will highlight the words that the website considers feminine or masculine, and then based on that you can make a few changes. The other one is around targeted channels. So make sure to try to reach a diversity of people. So don't just use your website or LinkedIn or the classical channels that you usually use. Try to be a bit more creative, and maybe use organizations like WISE or WES to help you spread the word. And then make sure to have diversity in your panels, because that will send a message to people that, oh, this is an organization that welcomes me. There are more people like me here. This is an organization that can be for me as well. And also make sure that the panel members receive appropriate trainings on diversity and inclusion and unconscious bias, just so they make sure that they're aware of their biases and that they are able to sort of catch themselves when they're being biased. It's not gonna sort of delete all the bias, but at least it will help you gain some awareness and be a bit more careful in your selection processes. And then once you have that training, make sure that people are actually comfortable raising any questions around inappropriate behaviors that they might notice. If somebody is being bullied, for instance, but nobody feels comfortable talking about it or going to HR or going to the event organizer, if that happens in an event setting, then nothing is going to change. You have to create that environment where people feel comfortable raising issues. And the other thing is that that message has to come from the top as well. So I would imagine that in your organization, other organizations as well, more junior people would feel less included, less comfortable raising uncomfortable issues. But somebody who is more senior might feel like they have more authority talking about these things. And then the next one is around making sure that it's very clear that you offer flexibility and reasonable adjustments. And that you remind people at all times about the fact that you do have these options if you do have them. And don't be afraid of reasonable adjustments. So for those of you who don't know what reasonable adjustments are, so that's around disability. So if you have an interview, for instance, it's about encouraging people with disabilities to tell you what they will need from you to make sure that the selection process is as accessible as possible for them. So, and many times it's going to be very simple and free things. It can be like, can we use Zoom because I can't get to the office in person, I have mobility issues, or I have caring responsibilities, I have to pick up my child at 4 o'clock when this interview instead is set, can we schedule? So, you know, it can be small things like that. And then for events, again, make sure that you have a diversity of people on your panels, that you have diverse audiences, and that you have a clear and simple codes of conduct that tells people that are attending your events that certain behaviors are not accessible. It's also good to use diverse images in whatever marketing materials that you have out there. And actually, the Academy has created a library of images that you can use. It's free, it's on our website. Feel free to use those images as you wish. And then in terms of the timing of your events, I would recommend to avoid any major holidays, and not just Christian holidays, but other holidays as well, Jewish holidays, Muslim holidays, Orthodox Easter as well, and then and then the last one, after your event, it's good to ask delegates to rate their experience, right? I'm sure a lot of you do send post-event surveys. Make sure to include a question around inclusivity as well, to get some feedback and see how you can improve for next time. Okay, so I think I have a comment here, so let me, oh yes, yes, I will make the slides available, so don't worry. Okay, let me share my screen again. Okay. Here are just a few links to some of the resources that the Academy has created that you can use for free. So everything that I mentioned is available on our website. So one of the things that I recommend using, especially if you're targeting younger people, is our This is Engineering campaign. It's a series of videos that really shows how exciting engineering is. And we make sure to have a diversity of people featured, real engineers featured in those videos. So I really recommend using that. It's so fun and exciting. It made me rethink my whole career as well. I thought, oh, I didn't know engineering can be so fun. So make sure to check that out. Then we also have an inclusive recruitment toolkit, which is a toolkit that we developed in partnership with engineering companies like Rolls-Royce, and the D&I measurement toolkit, which gives you some tips around measuring your diversity data and what you can measure if you're in HR, if you're a line manager, if you are part of the leadership group. The other program that we have is called JEEP, or the Graduate Engineering Program. This is a program for engineering students from underrepresented groups. And it's a series of conferences that we organize usually around London, but now it's going to be virtual, where we bring together students with engineering companies. And we prepare them, we tell them how to prepare for an interview, how to write a CV, how to think about their social media and their personal brand. And also, we also have a panel with senior engineers who tell them about the engineering career and how it can look like and how they can plan for it. And then the other bit is our Majority Allies Toolkit, which was published last year. So this Majority Allies Toolkit gives a list of things that allies can do to support people that are not part of the majority, and what organizations can do to support people that are not part of the majority, and how organizations can support the people who identify as allies, right? And we also have a series of videos, very short videos on allyship and what it means. And if you've been following Black Lives Matter movement, you've seen that this topic has come up quite a lot, and it really brought to the forefront how important it is that everybody plays a role in making sure that our workplace is as inclusive as possible for everybody. Okay. So just one more thing that I wanted to say around what we do at the Academy. And I encourage you to use this as you wish. So a year or 2 years ago, for International Women's Day, we featured some of our female engineers that we work with, whether they're fellows or people who got some of our grants and awards. And we did a series of interviews to really show everybody that actually everybody can be an engineer, and that a good engineer is everywhere. Okay, so now moving on to the progression framework. So as you know, RINA is part of it, and a very big part of it through Emma, who is a very active member. The diversity framework is a maturity matrix that helps professional engineering institutions and members of the Science Council see where they are on their D&I journey. So there are 4 levels, with the first level being the most basic level, and then the highest level is the 4th level. And under each level, there are 8 areas that we measure at the moment. We're currently revising the framework, so they might look a bit different, and it might look a bit different in a few months, but at the moment, these are the 8 areas that we measure. So we measure governance and leadership, membership and professional engineering institutions, meetings, conferences and events, communication, prizes and awards, employment, and monitoring and measuring. Just to show you how it looks like, these are the 4 levels. You see 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I took a screenshot of the area around membership and professional engineering and professional registration, because I know that that's something that you're really interested in. So you'll see at level 1, the most basic level, there's a list of areas there, a list of actions that you should be doing. So for instance, if you're at level 4, what we would expect you to do is to make sure that your leadership reviews your data and takes action and tracks progress. Another one is around making sure that you work with your members and partners to address systematic and organizational barriers. Okay. So next one. So just to give you a little bit of history about this progression framework. So the first, it was developed by the Academy in partnership with the Science Council. And we wanted to create something free, something easy to use, that would be designed specifically for the profession, right? For the engineering profession. There's a lot of benchmarking exercises out there, but most of them focus just on employment, so on the people side, on HR. But we wanted to create something that is relevant for us. So the first benchmarking exercise took place in 2017. We had 20 professional engineering institutions and 21 Science Council member bodies who participated in this collective benchmarking exercise. And now, like I said, we're currently reviewing the version that we have now, we plan to have our next benchmarking exercise in April 2021. So this is a simple timeline of what's going to happen in the next few months. So at the moment, we have a subgroup. Emma again is part of the group, so she's part of the steering group, but also part of the subgroup that is looking at revising the framework. We're going to bring these proposed changes to the progression framework steering group meeting in October. Hopefully they will be approved by them. In December, we plan to have a webinar on the diversity progression framework, where we want to sort of launch the new revised version, and also bring in a few case studies. So we're going to have two professional engineering institutions come in and talk to our delegates about why they should participate and how it helped them on their D&I journey. And then submissions for the benchmarking exercise will open in February, and the deadline for submitting your benchmarking exercise is at the end of April. The results will be published in June. So just so you know, we don't publish the results for each organization, so that's not going to be publicly available. However, each organization participating in the benchmarking exercise will receive an individualized report. So you'll have your own report telling you what your gaps are. And then there's going to be another public report where it's just going to look at the results for the entire professional engineering world and members of the Science Council. Okay, the next one. So these are it's a slides about our steering group. So these are just a few of the organizations that are on our steering group, and you'll see that RINA is there as well. So it is chaired by Paul Hardaker, who is the CEO of the Institute of Physics. And before him, our chair came from the Institute of Physics and Engineering and Medicine. So we have around 25 professional engineering institutions and members of the Science Council on the group, so it's quite big. Okay. So next one, so one of my last slides, is around what we've done. So the steering group organizes a series of workshops and webinars to get other professional engineering institutions and members of the Science Council on board on D&I and help them on their D&I journey. So far we had three events. The first one was in May 2019 and focused on how to increase the diversity and inclusion of your prizes, awards, and grants. The other one took place in September and focused on training, education, and accreditation. And the most recent one was on diversity data in June 2020. So as you'll see, the three areas that we focused on are match some of the areas in the progression framework, right? And the reason why we chose this particular topics is because our benchmarking, the collective benchmarking results told us that these are the areas where most professional engineering institutions and members of the Science Council really struggle with. So if you think that these are the areas where you struggle with as well, you're in good company. You're not the only one. So these are common challenges. Okay, so everything you'll find the slides from those workshops available on the website as well. The link here.
Great, thank you, Monica. Oh, sorry. Did you want?
And just, I think this is the last one. Yes, so the last one is around a series of resources that we put together from PIs and members of the Science Council around mental health. And that was a response to the COVID-19 crisis. And so some of our members on the steering group sent us some of links to some of their webinars, toolkits that they've created around mental health that you can use as well. So they're free and available for everyone. And that's it for me.
Yep, sorry about that. Thank you, Monica. So I just wanted to pull out a couple of things there, which is you will have seen that obviously we've aligned ourselves with the Royal Academy of Engineering progression framework. And I think that although as an organisation we are international and much of the supporting documentation that Monica's talked about is very UK centric, the progression framework itself is certainly applicable across the board. There is the data that I mentioned right at the beginning that we actually hold in RINA. We have some ability to look at our international membership and our gender mix, but we also recognise that that's only a very small part of our diversity inclusion. So we have been collating a new survey that we hope to send out in the not too distant future to try and get some more information on that diversity, inclusion and piece. What I would say, though, is that for anybody who wants to potentially join the working group, we're always looking for members. We've got UK and further afield members at the moment, but we are quite a small group, and the more activities we identify, the more support that I think we'll need. Yes, our main goal right at the moment is part of that sort of early stage benchmarking where we are looking for key areas that we can progress both in the short and long term. And if there are things that from your perspective, be it from your organisation or the part of RINA that you're a part of, or a committee that you think we can help with, then please don't hesitate to let us know. But yeah, we're happy to take any questions. It's very quiet. There's got to be at least one person with a question, I'm sure.
Kat.
Hi, Alan.
Bain.
Thank you.
Hi. A few years ago, I did a sociological awareness course on the back of being a member of a number of British and European standards and defence standards committees. And in it, a penny finally dropped for me as a UK citizen, why sometimes in international forums we fell out and had arguments because of different social and cultural norms and backgrounds. And I should have known that as a Scotsman who works in England, but it wasn't clear. I think the initiative from the Royal Academy and the initiative of all of our working group is really, really important, but I'm just sensitized to the fact that we are both the Royal Institute of Naval Architects of the United Kingdom, but also an international professional body. Have we thought about the cultural differences and why some things that might be really easy for us to do in one part of the world might be quite difficult in other parts of the world? And yep. that diversity should be a strength, but I just wonder how we capture it.
Yeah, so at the moment, what I'd say is it's something that's come up in the discussion in the working group. So we recognise, I mean, you only have to look at some of the statistics Monica gave about percentage of women working in engineering in other countries, way better than the UK. Perhaps there's things we can learn from other countries. And also where you might have a situation where perhaps in one country, certain types of disabilities are not as acceptable as in other countries, and the proactive activities that are being done to support individuals is neither the same nor as acceptable. So we know that it's very diverse, and we know that is a massive challenge. The stage we're at the moment is really very much about trying to benchmark where we currently sit as an organisation. So what I would say is we recognise that's a problem. Do we know how we're going to tackle it? Perhaps not yet. And that's also why we're very enthusiastic about having overseas members on the working group, because that allows us to help with better understanding the differences between challenges that are faced in different countries around the world. Thank you, Alan. Is there anybody else who has any questions that they'd like to ask?
Just to add to what Catriona said, there are a few other professional engineering institutions that do have international members. The Institute of Physics, TOPRA, who is a Science Council member, but they do have international members, Royal Society of Chemistry as well. And a lot of the challenges that you have, they probably have the same challenges as well. So I do encourage you to talk to them and see how they tackled some of that. So for instance, around diversity data, there are some things that you can't collect, for instance, in France, or some things around LGBT+, in some countries that's illegal. So there are all sorts of things that you need to keep in mind, not just from a cultural perspective, but also from a legislative perspective. Yeah, talk to others as well. They might have some answers for you.
Thank you, Monica.
I have a quick question, Monica. In your presentation, you mentioned about a few websites. Is it would it be possible to share those links?
Yeah.
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 Thank you very much. And also, just so while we're talking about, so you mentioned about this the high performance of this diversity in Romania. Is there a plan to investigate why they're doing this and how they're doing that? So it's not just to see the general figure, but to better understand how they manage to improve these figures compared to other countries.
yeah, it's not perfect, but Eastern Europe in general has a lot more women in engineering than Western Europe and the US. So in Bulgaria is 30%, which is quite a lot, not just in research, but overall all engineers. And there are all sorts of reasons for that. So one of the reasons can be, it's probably around the legacy of communism as well. The messages that people got at the time, where everybody had to contribute, everybody was supposed to be working outside the workplace, outside the home, so both men and women. But from a more positive note, from a more positive side, I think it's about, I personally think that it's about the messages that people get from society, and how prestigious engineering is as well. So it's very prestigious to be working in engineering. People know that if you work in engineering, you're gonna have a job at the end, and you're gonna be well paid. So it's considered to be a very safe option. But yeah, it's about the messages that you get, and they can be campaigns. Although to be honest, because I was actually thinking about that, Eastern Europe, at least my country, where we do have, I'm from Romania, so we don't have anything like the Royal Academy of Engineering. We don't have all these professional engineering institutions, all these campaigns that are, like you had to spend millions of pounds to create them. It's more grassroots. It comes from the family and the messages that parents send to children, and also probably the messages that you get in media and newspapers, how they're portrayed, how female engineers are portrayed in pop culture, in newspapers, on TV. So it's not something that is so male the way it's seen here. I think here you have this image that you have to be a man, a white man, to be in engineering. Well, I think maybe in other countries you don't have the same associations. You don't necessarily associate a certain profession with a gender, with a particular gender.
Thanks,
Okay.
Monica.
Thank you,
I can just see Andrew has a question. He has his hand in the air anyway.
I do have a question, thank you. It's more of an observation, I think, carrying on in the same way. Just as a recruit, if I'm recruiting, I put myself in the role of a recruiter for, I don't know, a senior naval architect, somebody probably well into their 30s. The options I have, I feel I am just perpetuating the current situation. The whole system is a pyramid. I think Catriona has described the percentage levels at various membership grades through the institution, and I take it the associate members will represent the student base, will they? So that's people still in university education. So if we don't have the bottom filled, then people are not going to progress to the top, and it makes it difficult, even with positive discrimination and making sure that there isn't unconscious bias in recruiting activities. It's very hard to find these people. By the time they're 30, they don't just move in from the side. They have to have come up through primary schools, secondary schools, and education. So I think what this rambling point is trying to get to is that unless the bottom is filled and expanding out towards the 40, 50%, how can I do anything in my individual recruiting above that?
Yeah, so I think that's very fair, Andy, and I think that's, I mean, this is some of certainly what Monica is, what they're trying to provide to help is partly at those younger levels, but it's partly at the later levels. I think so this is my observation from the UK perspective, and I apologise for that, but it's the experience that I've got, and that is that over the last, I'd say, potentially 10 or so years, a huge amount more work is going into ensuring that children, girls and boys at primary schools and secondary schools get to see that engineering is not necessarily what they think it is, and that it's there's a lot of breadth in engineering. Maritime is an interesting area to go into, and we have to remember that if we've started helping out children who were 8-10 years ago, they're only 18 now. So we know that there's a level of flow through, and perhaps we haven't necessarily seen all the benefits of the efforts that have been put in. I also think, though, that we've focused a lot on the gender question and perhaps not so much on the wider diversity and inclusion issues that you see. And so actually we're probably behind the curve on those other areas as well. And then finally, though, that even though we perhaps are starting to see that pick up a little bit at the bottom, but not as much as we would like and would want to have, we also have a problem, I think, with retention later on. And when I mentioned the winner of our ED&I award, Natalie, the big problem that we sometimes have is where people have left for career breaks, men and women, but often it's women because they are having children, taking maternity leave. Coming back into the industry is hard, and actually we see a drop off in women members, people who go from student and associate member to actual member, in women that we don't see in men. So I think that there are a variety of issues, and I think we have to try and look at where we can perhaps make the most difference, but understand exactly your point, which is that things don't happen overnight, and actually you have to be able to wait and see the outcome as much as look for the short-term gains.
Okay, no, that's great, thanks.
We have another question from Kirsi. Kirsi, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to just basically comment on this idea of a lack of pipeline of women. I had a global career in American Bureau of Shipping and worked with people around the world. And I think the percentage of women is actually quite high at the junior levels. And I think the pipeline, I think we cannot always use the lack of the pipeline as the argument. I think the problem is that the funnel gets very tight for women for the various reasons that have been mentioned, the retention and so forth. But I do think that there are a lot of junior women, and I think they need attention to be promoted so that we have naval architects at the senior level as well.
Thank you, Kirsty. Those are really useful observations. Yeah, I think you're right. I think there is, it's more than just one thing, isn't it? Does anybody else, sorry, excuse me, does anybody else have any questions they'd like to ask? Well, if not, I think that's a reasonably good timing because we're just after 2 o'clock. I'm sure everybody's very busy and has lots of things to do. If you've got any observations or comments or questions that come up later on, or you suddenly are motivated to join our working group, or provide us with some challenges that you think that perhaps we might miss or that we might like to try and attend to, then I'm sure Dimitri would happily take emails. Is that right? Good. We'll happily take emails from you and any comments and questions that you might have. But I really appreciate you all turning up. It's nice to see a good number of people enter the discussion, and I hope at least there's a few useful tips that you can take away and think about for those of you particularly on our committees and in our branch structures, on how perhaps the way you do things in whichever part of the world that you're in can perhaps encourage a more diverse membership. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a wonderful session. Thank you very much.